We are absolutely surrounded by content, right? Images, music, articles, it is everywhere. But have you ever really stopped to think about who owns all that stuff and what you're actually allowed to do with it? Today, we're going to decode copyright law in India. Now, I know, it might sound a little dry, but it quietly governs pretty much everything we create and share online.
Okay, let's start with a question that probably hits close to home for a lot of us. You're scrambling to finish a project, you do a quick image search, you find the perfect photo, and boom, you drop it right in. Come on, we've all done it. But was it legal? Let's find out exactly where that simple little click can cross a very real legal line.
You see, at the heart of copyright law is a really simple idea. There's a protective line drawn around a creator's work. And the trouble really begins when you cross that line without getting permission.
And that line has a name: copyright infringement. The key word here is unauthorized. A great way to think about it is like digital trespassing. When someone creates something original, they automatically get exclusive rights to it. So using, copying, or sharing that work without their say-so is basically like walking onto their creative property uninvited.
So what does this trespassing actually look like in India? Well, the Copyright Act is super specific about it, and it's not just about making a direct copy. Distributing copies of the work, adapting it, like turning a book into a screenplay, or even performing it in public without permission, all of that counts. The big takeaway here is that infringement covers a whole range of actions, not just a simple copy and paste job. The rules seem pretty strict, right? Basically, don't use what isn't yours. But that's not the whole story. What if I told you there are times you can actually cross that line and the law will be completely on your side? Yeah, this is where the law gets really interesting. It isn't just some rigid, unmoving wall. It's actually designed with built-in doors, or what we call exceptions. The system gets that for society to grow and learn and innovate, we need to be able to engage with existing works in certain, very specific ways. So how do we find these legal pathways? Well, there are three main routes. First, you've got works in the public domain. Those are totally free for anyone to use. Second, some things just can't be copyrighted in the first place, like raw facts or general ideas. But the most important one, and the most complex, is this concept of fair dealing. Now, you've probably heard the American term fair use. Fair dealing is India's version, and it's what we're going to zoom in on. Fair dealing is the law's big balancing act. It basically says that, look, while creators absolutely must be protected, the public also needs access to their work for things like research, commentary, and education. It's not a free pass, but it is a very specific exception for uses that are seen to benefit society as a whole. But how do you know if your use actually qualifies as fair dealing? Well, there's no simple checklist. In the US, they have a famous 4-factor test for fair use. And while Indian courts are a bit more flexible, they ask very similar questions. They weigh your purpose. Is it for profit or for education? They look at how much you used. Was it just a small, necessary bit? And crucially, they ask, does your use hurt the original creator's ability to make money from their work? It's always a judgment call, a balancing act based on these core ideas. Now, these aren't just abstract ideas floating around. They are written directly into India's legal code. So let's take a quick look at the specific act that governs all of this. Everything we've been talking about is anchored in this one single piece of legislation, the Copyright Act of 1957. This is the official rulebook for all creative works in India, and it lays out both the protections and the permissions. And to really get how the law works, you just need to look at two key sections. Think of it like this. Section 51 lays out all the rules, what you can't do. But right after that, Section 52 gives you the exceptions, what you can do. It explicitly says that fair dealing for things like research, criticism, or news reporting is not infringement. This is the legal engine that drives that whole balancing act we talked about. Of course, laws are just words on a page until they get tested in the real world. So how do Indian courts actually interpret this balance between the rules and the exceptions? A couple of landmark cases show this perfectly. In the Amarnath Sehgal case, the court basically said, yep, using art for academic purposes can totally be fair dealing. And in the R.G. Anand case, it drew a really clear line, saying that using a work for criticism or review is simply not infringement. These decisions prove that the exceptions back in Section 52, they have real teeth. So when you pull all these different pieces together, the rules, the exceptions, the big court cases, a central theme starts to emerge. It's really all about one thing: balance. And this gets to the very soul of copyright law. It's not just about locking things down for the creator. Honestly, think of it as having a 50-50 mission.
Half of it is dedicated to protecting and rewarding creators for their hard work, but the other half is all about making sure the public can access, critique, and build upon that work to create a vibrant culture for everyone.
All right, so let's lock in the key takeaways from all this. Number 1, infringement means using a creative work without permission. Simple. But number 2, India's law has a powerful escape hatch called fair dealing for things like research and criticism. And finally, underneath it all is that fundamental goal to always balance the creator's rights with the public's interest.
And that brings us right to the edge of the future. This entire legal framework we've discussed is built on one core assumption: a human creator. But as artificial intelligence starts generating its own art, its own music, its own text, we're left with a gigantic question that is going to define the next chapter of this story. If a machine makes it, who's the creator? And what, if anything, do they actually own?